it goes with what I just mentioned, that I don't think you should not say anything when there's things that are seriously bothering you. You should be able to have a conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But
I agree 100%.
Next point, or did you want to add a little bit more?
It just, I mean, you know the difference between nagging and criticizing and bringing up a valid concern, right? Like everyone knows the difference. And so, one of them, you got to let go of control. and the other one, it's like, okay, you got to be able to have conversations and communicate
properly.
You can't just stuff everything down and be like, okay, whatever you say, dear. That's when guys do it, it's not good. When women do it, it's not good. It has to be.
And she kind of borders on that at times. And again, I know it's because she's dealing with these really masculine women, and she kind of has to really rein them in. So I get that, but again, I wish she had kind of added in, once you get to that point where you've surrendered and you can have conversations effectively, that how to do that and how to maintain that and things
it's more like
that.
Don't tell him how to drive,
which she does mention.
Tell him how to do the things that he's doing, let him do the thing. Don't pick apart the thing. If he's fixing something, don't point out where he dropped something, or just like let him be and let him do the thing. But when it comes to something that's a really important thing in your life, you got to have a conversation. In fact, he should be seeking you out for the conversation, because again, with the hang gliding example, look, if you're a guy and you're going to take your kids to go hang gliding or do something dangerous, and you haven't not asked permission from your wife, but consulted with her to say, look, I'm going to do this thing. You might not like it,
but I've researched it. This is how safe it is.
And
this is
and
what
before
we're
I
gonna do.
commit to doing this, I would love to get your input on this, just to run this by you to see what you think about it, make sure I'm not crazy and that this makes sense, right? If you approach it that way as a man, her value, she feels like you just
and she'll respect you more because you took the time to think about her and consider her. Like, there's a difference between doing what you just said and then asking, can we do this to your wife? Because if you're like, can we do this to her? Then she feels like she's the man and she has the authority, and she's more likely to act like, no, you can't, or whatever. And act like you're another kid just trying to, we watched the Mrs. Doubtfire musical, and the dad kind of acted like a kid to the point where the oldest daughter was like, I feel more of adult than my husband. And then, by the end, he realized a lot of stuff and he, manned up. But it's along the same lines. It's like, if you're coming to your wife and you're like, can we do this, or certain things like that, then she's in the more masculine. But if you take her into consideration, that doesn't take away your authority. That doesn't take away you as the leader. And that's why it's so important you use the word leader, because a leader takes into consideration the people he's leading. He doesn't just lead people and doesn't think about them or care about them and just be like, follow me, don't ask questions. Like, that's not how a leader operates.
And as a man in our relationship, I make a lot of decisions without consulting you, like stuff that I need to do, buy this thing or business thing or investment thing or whatever, because I got the financial thing, I got that handled. But for example, if I were going to get a car, and not because of the cost of it, but because you're going to be driving in that car or riding in that car, I'm not just going to go and buy whatever car I want and whatever I think is best. I'm going to talk to you about it because I want your input on that, on what kind of car would you like? What kind of car should we buy? You see what I'm saying? And so that's the thing about it as a man, is you have to understand when your decisions start to affect the other people in your family and in your life, and they're important, they should be consulted, or their opinion should be solicited. Without them having to come and say, hey, wait a minute, what are you doing? So I think there's that part of it too. So, but again, I do think that if a woman does follow a lot of the things in this book, that the man's more likely to start stepping up and doing those things.
I agree. The next point is she talks about taking care of yourself, which she talks about this in a way of like, it'll also keep you from nagging him sort of thing. You can kind of let go. But also, we were talking about this in the car, that I feel like it can be hard for women to take time for herself because it feels selfish. And women get conditioned from such a young age to be a good girl and do as you're told, and, don't have boundaries and people please so everybody's happy, and don't be like too bossy, or don't be this. And so, like, we from a very young age are conditioned to not really take the time to do stuff for ourselves. It's a lot of times to do stuff for other people. And then when we become wives, we add a layer on top of that, you know, taking care of your husband, which you should want to do. I'm not saying that you shouldn't want to do that. But then add kids in the mix too. And I feel like kids is where women really lose their identity. And they really lose, you know, the taking time for yourself and the self-care, because it feels so selfish that when you have a kid, you're like, I'm just supposed to focus on this kid. Like, I brought this kid into the world. I'm like the person teaching them how to be a human being and all of these things. And your kids have their own schedule and they have all these other things. And you're like, well, how am I going to fit in this time? But like we talked about, and I've said from the beginning too, that you have to do as you do on an airplane, put your oxygen mask on before helping others. But I do feel like as a woman, it's harder. It's a harder thing for them to actually do.
Right.
And I know that men struggle with this as well too. They have to do the same thing. Everybody needs to take the time to do stuff for themselves in order to take care of everyone around them better. But as a woman, since our nature is this nurturing, caring sort of feminine energy, that it's often hard to take the time that you need for yourself. And like I said, when she mentions it, it's good to help you kind of let go.
Right.
Because you're focusing on yourself instead of focusing on your husband and what he's not doing right and things like that. And I know that's why she brings up a lot of it. But I thought that was a good point to make, though, for both sides. For both the letting go part, it will help you do that. If you're pouring more into your cup and like letting him figure out the stuff that he needs to figure out. I'm not saying ignore your husband or, you know, don't hang out with him. But, and same if you have kids too, to pour into your cup and do the things that is self-care for you and your alone time, your little like hobbies and things like that. You'll be able to pour more into your kids and your husband. Yeah. So I thought that was a good
And you'll be helping them too, especially if they're boys, to not be a baby when they grow up, because they're going to have to do some things on their own. It's like mom needs to take some time and she needs to go relax in the bathtub for an hour. So go play. Like, you know, like you got to take that time, or mom needs to go work out, go do her work, you know, whatever it is, because you got to take the time. Because, and the thing about it, what it really fundamentally comes down to, and I, you know, I've said this before, is that, and a lot of people don't like this, is you can't love someone else unless you love yourself first.
That's true.
You think you're loving other people, but there's resentment behind it. Because if you don't take time for yourself and you're not taking care of yourself,
needs.
Exactly. If your needs aren't being met, you can be kind on the surface level, but everyone can feel it. They can feel you don't really want to be here. You don't really want to be doing this. Your sacrifice feels like you're trying to be a martyr rather than, like, it shouldn't feel like a sacrifice. Right? When you're doing good for people and nurturing people, it shouldn't feel like a sacrifice. And if it does feel like a sacrifice, then that probably means that you need to actually make sure your needs are being met first, so that it doesn't feel like a sacrifice anymore. And I'm not saying that there's never times that you do have to sacrifice for some, you know, but it shouldn't be every day and it shouldn't be all the time. It shouldn't always be.
Better than